Well, welcome to Newstead Art Gallery here at beautiful Bondi Beach on the land of the Gadigal people to whom we pay our respects. I'm Adrian Newstead, and for the past year I've been delighted to work with Indigenous Curator John Mundine on a retrospective exhibition of artworks by the father of urban Aboriginal art, Gordon Syron, who's with us today. Gordon began painting more than 60 years ago whilst a prisoner in Long Bay Jail. Today I'm privileged to be joined by the prominent Australian and international jurist and academic, the Honourable Michael Kirby.
Thank you, Adrian.
Our former Justice of the High Court of Australia, and Philip Ruddock, who amongst his many roles over a lifetime of service acted as Australia's Federal Attorney General and Minister for Immigration and Multicultural and Indigenous Affairs. As we sit here in front of Gordon Syron's 1978 painting Judgement by His Peers, which has recently been acquired by the National Gallery of Australia, I'll be asking him some questions which were framed by the prominent and celebrated Gamilaroi legal academic, writer, filmmaker and Indigenous rights advocate, Professor Larissa Behrendt, who is currently overseas. This is to be a conversation about art, justice, and the unfinished work of the Australian nation. And perhaps I can begin with a question for both our guests. What does Gordon Syron's art ask of us as a nation? Michael, perhaps you could begin.
I think, first of all, I pay my respects to the Indigenous people all across our continental country, and to Gordon, who is a leader and is expressing through art the many injustices that have been done by our legal system to the Indigenous people over the years. And I pay respects also to my old school friend. Well, it wasn't really school. We were both at university by that time, but only just. And Philip Ruddock, as a minister in many fields, he ended up as the father of the House of Representatives, longest serving member, so that's a wonderful service in our federal politics, democratic politics. And I'm very pleased to be here surrounded by the wonderful and arresting portraits and paintings of Gordon Syron. Now, what does it say to us as a nation? It tells us what has so often been said, but not always followed up, that injustices were done because of presuppositions in the scale of civilization and humanity that came with the First Fleet and existed in Australia for a very long time afterwards. Through art, Gordon Syron has been able to express from the viewpoint of an Indigenous person where we fell down, where we went wrong. We weren't the worst offenders in the world. We weren't the cruelest in the world. We had some very good things in our system, but we also had some very bad things, and it took us a long time to recognise and acknowledge this and to get around to dealing with it in justice to the First Nations people. And this painting behind me, Judgement of His Peers, is a very good illustration of teaching a lesson through art. It shows just what it was like to be an Indigenous person in our courtrooms, because it reverses the skin colour of everyone in the court.
It asks you to put the boot on the other foot, right?
Exactly, and it does so, I would say, in a somewhat understated way, because all the decoration of the court and the furniture and the way it's set up is the same, but suddenly you're struck by the fact that something is very different. And what is very different is that every actor in the drama is a person who is non-Indigenous, non-First Nations, and what it might feel like to be in such an environment, and how alien it would seem to you, and how alien it often was. And so I think it's a very good symbolic piece. I'm delighted, and I've only just heard that it has been purchased by the National Gallery of Australia and will be on permanent display for the people of Australia to see and to think about it, and to just stand there and stare at it, and to think of the message that it is given. And I think that will be good for progress and good for the people of Australia.
So in a word, it's to recognise that a great injustice has been done.
Yes, but also to urge us to address the injustice. So many reports. This is a report I brought along today to have a prop in this conversation. And this is the latest report of the Australian Law Reform Commission, which I chaired back in the 1970s. And it deals with the over-incarceration of First Nations people, pointing out that in effect they are amongst the most incarcerated, imprisoned people in the whole world. We're not just talking about in our region or in our country of our kind, but in the whole world. The over-representation of Indigenous people is persisting and is serious and needs action. So this is a very good report. It was finished in 2017, and I would like Philip to explain what has happened, what has been done, what has our Parliament done to follow up this and many other reports, because it's one thing to write a report, and that law reform commissioners and judges can do, but getting action and reaching into the deep pocket of the Commonwealth to find some money to address the problem is the challenge. And that's the challenge that I now hand over from the judicial branch of government to the executive and parliamentary branches of government, because unless they tackle this, we'll go into the next century with the under-representation of the actors in the drama and the over-representation of the accused in the court.
So there you are, Philip. What do you think that Gordon's art is asking of us as a nation, and how do you answer Michael's question?
Yes, we're all friends.
He was always my senior. Can I just say that I do fondly remember the time at Sydney University when we were in the Sydney University Union, and he was several years ahead of me, and I came in.
Not that many.
No, several. Several is 2 or 3.
I see. Oh,
You were ahead of me.
as long as you don't think it's several.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. But can I first say thank you for your observations, but can I also endorse your acknowledgement of the country, of the people on whose lands we stand, and it's an appropriate acknowledgement, particularly given that Gordon is here and those of us in this venue are thinking very much about our Australians, First Nations people. Can I simply say that we came together with another great Australian, Marie Bashir. And before she passed away, she was working with Michael and myself to encourage the purchase of Gordon's works and to set up an appropriate venue for them to be held in posterity. And it's been a very significant challenge. Marie Bashir was a very good friend and a great Australian, and we used to see each other occasionally at church, and when she passed away I was very sorry to learn of her passing, but we were working together. Can I simply say that Gordon's work is telling the story of modern young Indigenous Australians and the journey that they are making and the challenges that they face. For me, in my time in public life, I saw a great deal of what he has represented. Before I became a minister, I chaired a parliamentary committee. You may not know that it was the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs. And we were dealing with issues relating to our First Nations people. It started looking at the land rights issues in parts of the Northern Territory, and where they were wanting to mine bauxite, and the impact it was going to have on the traditional owners of that land that the committee was first deliberating. But later we held many inquiries, and I became chairman of that committee and remained chairman of the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs until I became Minister for what was Immigration and Multicultural Affairs. It was interesting. Nobody thought that John Howard particularly liked the term multicultural, but he did name me as the first Minister for Multicultural Affairs. It was later that I had the privilege of being invited to assist him when he was dealing with issues relating to reconciliation, and I was appointed as Assistant Minister for the Prime Minister on reconciliation. At a later point in time, when they moved the Queenslander out of the position of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs, I was appointed double-hatted, being Minister for Immigration and Multicultural Affairs, Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs. And I had to deal with issues relating to the implementation of land rights. I had to look at many of the issues that impacted upon our Indigenous people right around Australia. And I have to say, it was always particularly challenging. But one of the remarkable people that I had assisting me was a fellow who followed many paths of yours. He was Tom Calmer. You know Tom?
Yes, of course.
Who's the Chancellor of the Canberra University and was appointed to the Social Justice Commission for a time. And he was my Chief of Staff when I was Minister for Indigenous Affairs. And I have to say, when you're aided in your role by people like that, you do have an impact. For me, I've wanted to see our Indigenous young Australians well educated, their culture acknowledged, but I want to see them being able to succeed in the same way that all other Australians are able to succeed. And education is very much the key to ensuring that, but it has to be in a way that acknowledges their heritage, their culture, their way of life.
If I could return to Gordon's work for a moment, there are a lot of paintings about the invasion, the coming of the English, the theft of the land, the displacement of Aboriginal people, a lot of the slogans in Gordon's works, and even his most famous imagery of the tall ships coming through the harbour. And in works like The Black Bastards Are Coming, which is another role reversal like this, in which the Aborigines are portrayed as white people and the English as black people. Why do you think it's been so hard for Australians to reckon with that history, and why has it become so difficult now? Is it just because we have so many Australians now from so many other backgrounds that are not as aware of the history as perhaps those with a European background are? What do you think, how can we reckon with that history, and what can be done to...
Well, I certainly think we have to promote to those who come and settle here in Australia that part of our history. It's not unique. I can say with some amusement that my family's relatives in the United States were descendant of the first Americans, and they were there at Plymouth Rock when the Europeans first arrived, and they are the traditional owners of the land of Hyannisport, the Kennedy compound. And all I can say is that being a first American is challenging.
But did they say, as the first Australians did, go away?
I suspect they probably did.
That's what
I don't think they were out there welcoming when they landed at Plymouth Rock, but they still have that issue that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
And so these are challenges of the colonial times. And from my point of view, I want to see the way in which we as Australians look back at our history and say, how can we deal with it in a way that brings us all together? Because we are one.